there will be a moment of trepidation or fear that will require a leap of faith into the unknown. For everybody who's doing something that is uncharted, it's unscripted. Everybody feels that same feeling. And if you are the person who chooses to accept your fear as a catalyst, as a challenger, and not turn from your fears, then you will find yourself in a unique space. I call it the clearing. You will find yourself in the clearing where fear has filtered out most of the people in the world. And it can be on the smallest scale of, I want to show my artwork or my drawing to somebody, but I decide not to because I don't think it's good enough.
Welcome to the Reinvention podcast. I'm Aaron Anderson, and I'm here with Sterling Hundley, artist, entrepreneur, and innovator. Sterling, how you doing, man?
Doing great, Aaron. Happy to be here.
So I described you as an artist, an entrepreneur, an innovator, but how do you consider yourself? You're trained as a painter, is that right?
Well, trained as a commercial illustrator more than anything, and I've transitioned into a number of different opportunities. I've found that illustration skill set, which is design thinking, problem solving, the ability to draw, the ability to manifest ideas as visuals, and a deep understanding and appreciation of communication is a universal skill set that has application well beyond, the commercial art world. So, but I think of myself right now, as I've evolved into this position in this space, as a creative investigator. And as a creative investigator, I'm trying to interject creative thinking skill sets and tools into non-creative industries.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good creative innovator or investigator, creative investigator.
Yeah, it's a riff off of principal investigator. And when I was doing some of these projects, it was a self-described title, but it seems to fit.
Well, so let's talk right about that, because one of the reasons I want to talk to you is you've had just a fascinating career. So you've had a normal career as an artist. You've done in galleries and museums and all that, but you've also worked for the Times and the American Baseball Association, NASA. You've done an awful lot of. You've had a really wide client base. How did that come about?
I would say that the first part, where I began as a commercial illustrator, was where I cut my teeth, and it's kind of where I made my name. So when I was doing that, I'm a VCU graduate, by the way. So I started here, left, came back, and did that whole thing. But I attribute a lot of that to individual clients, individual projects. It's the nature of freelance work and getting some moniker of success and visibility. It kind of leads to new projects. So, I was actively pursuing some of the dream clients, Rolling Stone and the New York Times and those things. And they were on a very short list of people I wanted and needed to work with. And I did everything in my power to court them and to pursue them and to market to them and to develop work that was right for them. And those things just kept building and building. And everything from getting into juried shows and new commissions. But I would say that everything from Major League Baseball to the Grammys, were somebody somewhere in the art director's position saying, hey, this kid's got something we can use.
So commercial illustrator, is that, so if I had other friends who were commercial illustrators, would their client list be as varied as yours?
Some. I would say that within any industry you can get, I've always thought about it as two different models. So model one is you find something that is a skill set that you exploit or that you use, that you pursue to the granular level. You get as good as you possibly can at doing one thing. And I was looking at my heroes and my mentors, and several of them were of the other mindset, which was to evolve in a space. And I am somebody who needs to evolve. I need to grow and I need to expand. And I think that has allowed for an expansion of different types of clients and different opportunities.
Yeah, that's that's something that a lot of people that I've interviewed have said something similar, which is to be interdisciplinary, you actually have to be rooted in one thing, right? You're not sort of just a little bit all over the place. There's one thing that you do that you apply in different areas and then grow in that application. Is that right?
100% correct. And, I think that, well, I know the thing that gave me any prominence and would lead to anybody wanting to hear anything that I had to say comes from, again, some level of success where it's an endorsement, it's a pedigree, right? So they say, oh, like we're talking about here, well, you've worked with so and so and so and so. There's got to be something there that's going to be a transferable skill set. And so, yeah, it's the old idea that you start with a very narrow vision and you expand once you have a level of success on the business side. Having financial stability within one area allows you to expand and diversify. And so, yeah, I think that anything, Aaron, you know this, we're a culture and a time of distraction. And one of the greatest superpowers that any of us can have is just the ability to focus and get something done.
I wish I had just a little bit of that superpower.
I wish I had more of it. So I did when I was younger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been getting dumber every year that I've grown.
Me too.
So the way that you and I met was through healthcare, oddly enough. You are VCU's, so the university that we work at, you're the first artist in residence in the health system, which is a really cool title. But a couple questions, like how did that come about and what exactly did it involve?
So I have to make a little edit just to all due humility. I'm the second artist in residence, believe it or not. The other was 40 or 50 years ago.
No kidding.
And I forget his name, but he was down working on murals down on MCV's campus. So I wish I had that distinction of being the first, but I'm quite okay being the first
We're gonna look this guy
contemporary artist in residence.
But it's been 50 years. It's been half a lifetime.
Oh yeah, it's certainly been an initiative to get it started, and this came about. I have to give credit to Ty Ruben Ellinson, who's my boss, the chair of our department. He came from multiple backgrounds. He was a fine artist, and he got into visual effects in Hollywood and had a lot of success. And he's really seen my ambition and my skill set and my abilities. And he said multiple times, you should think about doing this. He hasn't done anything for me like that. He hasn't opened the door, but he's supported me and he's helped expand my vision. And I think, in my life, I've had a number of mentors who have been willing to give their time and their expertise, and I've listened to them. So this was an expansion off of a prior project, which was where the NASA clientele came from. And I went down there, and I think that we did a really solid job. We can talk about that because that project has had some real scope and it continues. But what I was able to do there in this transfer of skill set, Ty kind of looked at that and said, there's an interest in building this bridge between arts and healthcare. We should think about getting you connected down there. And I started to look at what was going on. And Dr. John Nestler was here on the Monroe Park campus as the physician in residence. And I was just like, well, why can't I do something like that in reverse? And I met with Dr. Nestler, and he was very much a facilitator in relationships and getting that done. So it took somebody seeing something. I wish I could take credit for that. But I do have a lot of grit. I have a lot of follow through, and I was able to kind of get down and get those things done. And once you're in that space, then you have to prove your worth.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you have to prove your worth. You have to prove that the worth matters to patients. John Nestler is absolutely one of the reasons VCU is on the map in terms of arts and health. Let me go back to this. You said you worked with NASA because you said something interesting, which was the application of skill sets. So what I find with my own work in medicine is that I actually just take what I know from theater, which goes back to this narrow thing. I do this, but then I show up in medicine and they say, well, we have this problem. And I go, well, we have similar problems. Here's how we solve them, right? It's like being a shaman moving between worlds. But I'm not I'm not inventing anything new. I'm like, I know these skill sets from this area, and I apply them in a different area. And you mentioned working with NASA, applying different skill sets. Is that what exactly were you talking about?
Well, I would say I would even expand on what I said as skill sets and processes, right? So, methodology. And so, yeah, I think going to any space where you are the person who can take complex ideas, complex information, understand it, and distill it back into a concise statement will always have value, that communication piece. And I really think that that's what I bring to the table. In addition to that, beyond just the verbal communication and the written communication, I also can draw. And I don't say that with ego. I can draw and I can manifest ideas. That's what drawing is to me. It's thinking out loud. So to be the person in the room who can gather the information and then show people and say, hey, is this what we're talking about? Whether it's on a whiteboard or a sketchbook or anything else, and either get to a hard yes or a hard no versus I don't know. Let's spend some time and go back out to our computers and gather some information. It's like, no, I'm going to show you what it is that I'm talking about.
What you're able to do, this is fascinating. You're able to create a shared mental model for everyone. So you can say, is this what we're talking about? And it's cheap and it's fast, and you've done essentially a visualization of the ideas that we're talking about so that everybody can get on the same page. Is that right?
Correct. And whether, less diagrammatic and infographics than actual turning forms in space and being able to show people things from different angles and different ideas. So that entire skill set from ideation, which is really the thing that I love the most about what I do, is I get to think and I get to manifest thoughts. But the drawing, the painting is a necessary method of realizing these things. And it's the fastest method that I know of. It's faster than having a computer and being able to work in front of people. But this is very similar, and Aaron, you'll know this from what you do, and certainly I know that you interviewed Ace and a number of other folks, but this is kind of like the agile development program in startups, right? So it's, what is agile is basically having somebody embedded in a space where they're getting real-time feedback on a problem they're trying to solve. I'm the equivalent of that as a visual artist.
Yeah. So when I started working with team-based communication with Dr. Alan Dow, especially high functioning teams, one of the first skill sets is a shared mental model, right? So let's say you come to, there's a body in the woods, right? You pump a pool and there's somebody who's floating in the pool. You pull them out of the pool. Everyone needs to be on board with what they think is going on. I think the person is drowning, or I think they're having a heart attack, or whatever. But you have to say it out loud so that you have this shared mental model and everyone is moving. And it turns out that the easy, fast communication of that shared mental model is one of the most important things for teams to be able to innovate and move forward quickly. And you're able to put that shared mental model in a visual form, but also you're able to communicate the processes of. Are you doing that as an outsider, or are you doing that as somebody who's embedded with them? Like with NASA. With NASA, what exactly did you do?
So that project started, again, all credit to Ty Rubin. This was what a great boss does. So I did a lot of work built around trying to manifest what time looks like. So as a painter, I'm obsessed with the notion of time as a ever-present entity that's in our lives that has no face, has no name. And what this did is it gave me permission to document the effect of time on my family. What that did was allowed me to spend time with my family and to be present and to draw and to have these embedded canvases throughout my home and build the work over time. And he saw the sketchbooks, he saw the paintings that came out of that, and he said, you should do that for SpaceX. And I said, yes, I should. And he goes, let me show you something. He goes, he pulled up the work of an illustrator from the 60s. Brian might still be alive. He did the Madman poster art,
Ryan,
the TV series, but he was Brian Sanders is his name. But Ty said, let me show you something. He brought me over to his office, to his computer, and he pulled up all these drawings that Sanders did while on the set of Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. And it was all behind the scenes, incredible drawings. He did some paintings from it. And he said, this is the type of work that you should do for SpaceX. And so from there, it's interesting. I convinced the dean at that time, Sean Brickley, to support through the university my funding of going down to the SpaceX Dragon Crew, the unmanned Dragon Crew launch. It's been several years now.
That's cool.
And I got just kind of a VIP ticket down to as close as, you could get without being press. And I got down there. I had like 2 or 3 days, and I hustled. I went down. I drew everything. I drew rockets. I drew rocket engines. I was just enjoying being there. I documented the experience. But while I was there, several things happened. One, there were some NASA scientists, and they were doing some type of promotional thing for, I think it was Artemis at that point. And I started talking to them and asked them about what they were doing. And I've always got my sketchbook on me. And it has been such a great way of brokering conversations where people will see it. They'll even ask, like, "Oh, is that a sketchbook?" Like, "Oh yeah, I'm just down here drawing." And I show them some things, and all of a sudden, drawing is a universal language. It crosses across geographic locations and language and time and everything else. And as they saw that, it facilitated conversation, and got to meet them and got their names. At the same time, this is just weird how things work out. I had a good friend of mine, a former student. His name is Brian Hubble. He was driving to Richmond to have a solo show as I was kind of heading down to Florida. This preceded actually getting there. And he just reached out and said, "Hey, just want to meet up. I'm coming in town, have a show." So, "Oh man, I'm going out to Florida right now.
I have to work with NASA.
I'm going to catch this." But nothing was in place at that point. Nothing was in place. All I said was, "I'm going down to document this SpaceX launch." And at that point, I was trying to make all these connections through other faculty and through friends. Like my mind was primed on the project. I said, "Brian, remind me, your sister works for NASA, doesn't she?" Right? And I'd met her like years before. And he goes, "Oh yeah." And so you can imagine how that went. He sent a text, and before I knew it, she was reaching back out to me. I told her I was in Florida. She said, "I know a guy." And all that led to some really interesting drawings and amazing life experience. And then nothing. Like, it didn't go anywhere while I was at Cape Canaveral. Get back 3 weeks later, Jennifer Hubble Viudez gives me a call. She says, "Sterling, this is Jennifer. I think we have a project that we'd like to bring you in on." And it's just interesting how planting those seeds of doing something leads to something. Yeah. This is where it gets particularly interesting. If I can continue on this.
No,
this
I mean, if we're in a business class right now, this is a case study in networking and the importance of long-term networking.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I get back. She calls me. They start to tell me about this project they're working on, and I'm just chomping at the bit. Like, this is super exciting. It's basically I'll just frame it this way. It's an autonomous drone project. Okay, what in the world do I have to do with an autonomous drone project, right? So I take it to Ty, and we put together a pitch that basically says this is the type of thing that we think we can do. And Ty lent some work to it. I lent some work to it. I put the proposal together and sent it back. And this was completely volunteer at this point. She says, "Look, we had a conference call with several people from NASA. Said, we're having this blue sky session next week. We're going to have the engineers and some of the scientists, the people working on the project, the administrators, they're going to be there. If you all want to come," I'm like, "I'm there. Just count me in." Yeah. And Ty wasn't able to go, so I rallied with Professor Jason Bennett, and he and I went to NASA Langley. We got on site and went into this room, and it was just a big round room of all these people trying to make this project happen. And I did my best to interject and to add value. Before the end of the meeting, we were up with the whiteboard drawing things, and we kept drawing things. And I remember this moment. I was drawing things, and people were like, "No, that's not quite right. That's not quite right." And Jason got up and he drew something, and they're like, "Oh, that changes everything." So it was you know, this amazing moment where they saw the value of what wouldn't work and then what would with what Jason did. And it was interesting in that meeting. There was another university there. I'll hold back a little bit on who that was, but they were working on the engineering side of things. And it came down to this point in the conversation where we were talking about the design of the space, like the actual space that we were talking about that we were going to use.
Right.
And this other university said, okay, well, we'll take that on. We'll do that. And I said, actually, that's in our wheelhouse. That's what we do. We design, we organize, we can, because I knew that, and I know that design is at the center of everything, right? I think of design in the global sense as bringing things into human scale, right? That's how I define design.
Like that. That's a good definition.
In that moment, we took ownership of that part of the project. And what they basically said was, we want to take half of this contract that was going to the other university and give half to the team from VCU. And it happened in real time in a volunteer meeting because we showed our value. And so there's a lot of tangents from there, but that's how it got framed, that's how it got set up. And there's been a number of things, including a class that we built that spun off of that. It was called Blue Sky to Red Skies. And I ran that. We got students they got to go to NASA Langley. They got to meet with different scientists and help them communicate complex ideas. And one of the teams that we were working with, one of our teams, student teams, ended up redesigning NASA's tech transfer website. So it was one of the things where we thought that we could add the greatest value in communication. And it wasn't even an ask from NASA. Like, it was one of those things where we said, okay, if we're going to do illustrations, animation, video, and all these other things based off of the inventions, well, the delivery system of that engagement needs to be rethought too. And what better case study group than our own students, right? We were supposed to go back and give a pitch to NASA Langley administration on what we'd come up with. Well, the pandemic hit. And we were all super bummed out. We're like, we don't get to go back to the base. That was something we were looking forward to. I had to rally the students, and I said, I want you all to understand that everybody in the world is in this same situation in this moment. Yeah. These are the new limitations we're dealing with. And it might be a bummer that we can't go to the base, but I can almost guarantee you that we will get more access to more people if we do this as a Zoom presentation. Yeah, 100%. And what ends up happening is I really reached out to the dean's level at the university. We got a lot of support there. My contact, Jennifer, she reached out to NASA. Before I knew it, we were doing an agency-wide pitch to something like 40 people. Nice. And that led to 1 paid position and 3 paid internships. They built NASA's National Tech Transfer website, and that's going to launch here sometime soon.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Crazy. I'm so proud of them, man. They just kicked so much ass.
What a lot of people probably may not realize is that NASA, they're feeling the same pressure that every business is feeling now, right? I mean, there's competition, and they have to position themselves in the marketplace and all that stuff. So that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it's exciting, and it continues. I mean, the relationship is really good, and we've got some things in the pipeline, just discussions of where this might go from here. But it's just like anything in any business. It builds, and every business, as you know, is just a relationship. That's all that it is. Right. And if there's an exchange, an amicable exchange between services and compensation in business, then it works. If there's an amicable exchange of emotions and relationships and give in a personal relationship, then it works.
Yeah. So how does that, let's transition to healthcare and working in medicine. Cause I'm amazed at your students. There's one of the things about being in the arts that everybody, no one goes into the arts for money. If we wanted money, we would go into something else. But you have to make enough money to survive. But what you do, everyone that I've ever seen in the arts has this idea that they can, if you can find the thing that's in you and put it out in the world in some way, in some interactive way that's meaningful, you can add value to the world, right? And make the world a better place in some way. And working with NASA, that's got to feel good to your kids. I mean, your students, right? That's got to feel like I'm not just doing this project to do this project. I'm doing this project that has real world implication, especially with the Artemis project, which is going to Mars, right? Moon to Mars and all that stuff. Blue sky to red sky, as you said.
Right.
So they have to feel right some sort of sense of accomplishment. And I always found that in healthcare that's at the root of everything. You don't everything you do is about making life better for someone who's suffering or helping someone to not suffer. So how did you, I mean, so you talk with John, who's a mover and a shaker. So you got involved with that. And then how did you first start going over to the hospital? What were the ideas that you were going to bring over there?
Let me touch on the student emotional connection and what they got out of the NASA thing. Enormous. I mean, as you can imagine, I mean, it's palpable. I mean, they got jobs, they got paid, they have relationships and connections, and the vibe in the class was super high. I mean, we were all emotional about it, and I'm sure if we were in person, that it would have been even more celebratory, right?
A lot of hugs going on.
As far as the hospital, that was the challenge, and that's always the challenge. What do I have of value to offer? Because on one hand, I'm still an artist, right? And I'm still motivated by the personal narrative, the internal story. And what facilitates all this, what allows it to happen, is I still have a very active studio practice, and I'm drawing, and I'm painting, and I'm making things that I need to make. I've just chosen to use a more emotional catalyst than, when I was an illustrator, you are always working with someone else's narrative. So it's the external narrative, right?
Right.
And as I transitioned into painting, the biggest question, the biggest challenge is not the time or the space or the audience. It's actually, it becomes a very personal thing. Like, what's the content? What are you going to make paintings about? What's your thesis and your idea? And as I tried to move from commercial illustration to personal painting for galleries, that would be shown in galleries, that is always the void that you have to answer. And I've done a lot of soul searching with that over the years in different directions preceding the healthcare stuff. But what's more emotionally charged than healthcare? And
right.
When I got down there, this was the Department of Surgery. So I was lack of better terms, my term for legendary, you asked about that, we'll talk about it later, but the embedded artist is the whole philosophy that you go and you do things and you expose yourself to things with the intention of extracting an experience. And that experience is the catalyst for whatever direction you go with your creative content and application. So after having run workshops for years for a lot of people, I pulled back and I decided to embed down at the hospital. So that was meeting with patients in the clinicals, meeting with the doctors. The doctors were phenomenal that I got to work with. Going into the operating room in the burn center and cardiothoracic, it was overwhelming emotionally. And the thing, Aaron, that I struggled with from the beginning was, what value do I have? What right do I have to be here on somebody's worst day, right? And realizing that the healthcare practitioners do this literally every day,
right,
that they're working,
right,
and just paradigm shifting exposure to something. But I knew that was going to happen. I didn't know to what extent or degree, but I knew it's not like I was naive. I deliberately chose to go and be exposed. So, getting down there, the first, I'd say 4 months, 5 months, maybe 6, I can't quite remember, but it was just like, hi, this is Professor Hundley. He's from the School of the Arts. He's working on a project with us. Even the doctors didn't quite know, the surgeons didn't know how to introduce me in the beginning. And I was in a space that was probably the size of your podcast studio, these tiny clinical spaces where the doctors are talking to a patient and a family member. And I'm over in the corner with a sketchbook and I'm sketching.
Right.
It's weird. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
No.
It's got to be weird for people, and it's uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, the doctor. It's
but-
clear. Everyone in the room. It's clear what their role is, right? The patient is there to get
Right.
healed and to give information. The doctor is there to find out, to make a diagnosis and to recommend treatment. And the nurse is there to provide care. There's a whole bunch of things. And then there's this guy with a sketch pad, right? And it's not entirely clear how he fits into the known narrative of what's going on.
Yeah, and the only thing that would have made it more uncomfortable is if I had a big old video camera in there, like it's But here's the thing: I think the thing that helped a great deal is I'm not shy about, like, if I see that someone's uncomfortable, I'll turn and I'll show them what I'm drawing. And it's rather abstract. They're moving. It's, there's details. So it's like, here, this is what I'm doing. And again, drawing is a universal language. It's something that helps build a bridge. And some of the patients got quite excited about, but they had to give me permission first to be in the room. It was a case by case scenario. And some of the patients said no, right? So the problem still remained that all of that at that point in time was, I felt like a voyeur. I felt like somebody who was just taking and not giving, right? My motivation was pretty clear. It was pure. I was there trying to figure out what value I had.
I mean, you were taking space, but it wasn't entirely clear what that particular patient was going to get out of that encounter.
Not at that moment. So that's the thing that I struggled with. I lost sleep over. I was just trying to figure out, what can I do for these patients that somebody else isn't doing? How can I take some of the skill set that I have and the exposure, the knowledge of technology, whatever it is, and bring it back to the hospital? Right. And I was walking down to MCV one day. This is right after the winter break. And it just, like a light bulb went off. And it's like, oh, I am here to identify problems, systematic problems that can be addressed through technology and creativity. And that's where I started introducing myself as a creative investigator. That was an idea that built off of the work as a principal investigator on the NASA project. It's like, okay, this is different. People don't know what a PI is in the world outside of academia, but creative investigator is self-explanatory. And what I was able to do is I took this and I organized my thoughts. I put together a 13 or 14 project proposal on everything from how to navigate the hospital to introducing 3D printing at point of contact. There was certain patients that had come in that were struggling with very specific things that they needed. One case was a compression plate. And the compression plate, the process for getting that was cumbersome and antiquated. And so, well, what if we could custom design one here from a 3D scan and print it, within a day, instead of waiting weeks to have something that's not custom? And so once I had an idea as to outcome and how we actually could help people, we started getting momentum, right? And those projects are much easier to frame. You can put a budget to them. You can put time to them. You can start to address applications that way. So that was the turning point for me. Is like, all of a sudden, it's almost like you hear people talk about imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I had value to these patients and to the healthcare system, and that's how I did it. All of a sudden, we were talking about AR solutions, VR solutions, 3D printing, things that are somewhat in my line of sight, but they're more peripheral than they are direct things. But I was able to say, I've got a student here that's really interested in 3D modeling. I have a resource here. Let's get these things connected. And I help start making these, facilitating these relationships. Creative
investigator. Was that the first time you'd use that term for yourself?
It was.
That's awesome. So when you're in the room, do you have is there a process, or do you have a specific process of application, like problem, like sort of design thinking, or is there a particular way of approaching each individual problem, or are they all different?
So, I mean, design thinking has been an idea that I've been introduced to later. There was a lot to my ideation process that was unavailable when I was a student, and just no one teaches thinking. Certainly not at that time. I think design thinking has done a great job of introducing the process. But in short, my thesis is that the scientific method and the creative process are not different. They are actually one and the same.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And so I function as an entrepreneur, as an artist, as a whatever I am. I need to understand the limitations of the problem. That comes from spending time in a space. Yeah. So if I can boil things down to the notion of what I call the three-sided box. So the three-sided box is audience, industry, time, space, and content. And if I know time, space, and content, then it's my job to figure out how to solve the problems within those limitations.
Right.
So I have to build the limitations first, and then I can work within those and start to ping different ideas back and forth.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Freedom through form. So what are the boundaries you're looking for? Time, function, and what?
Well, so first of all, it's at the heart of it is the need for communication of something, right? So it can spin off into solving things beyond communication, but there is, I call it audience.
Okay.
So this comes from this concept that's not mine, but it's a book assumes a reader, a painting assumes a viewer, a song assumes a listener. There is a point of connection of the artist
it's a thing for someone, right? And you identify that someone.
Exactly. Identify the someone, and then I identify the narrative. So I call that the narrative or the content. Like the word is a content. I've made these words deliberately open and vague. Because I want people from different industries to be able to look at this and say, okay, well, content, what is that? Well, it's story, it's narrative. Right. And if you're looking at narrative, it's internal versus external, but it's the thing, it's the stuff that you start with. And you're trying to get that stuff or a message about that stuff to a person or a group of people. So that's the spine of it. That's how it starts. And then within that, the actual, so I think about on this three-sided box, if I could show you a diagram, content would be on the bottom. Time is on the left side. Space is on the right. So what is time? Well, you talk to a filmmaker about time, it means one thing. If you talk to a painter about time, it means another thing. If you talked about somebody in the theater or dance, time means something completely different, right? So time is deliberately open. Is it deadline? Is it exposure? Is it what type of limitation of time are we talking about? The other side is space. Right. Again, very broad.
Where is it going to be?
But space can be the performance space. Space can be the theater. Space can be the number of pages in a graphic novel. Space can be the actual proportions or dimensions. But those types of limits, so where a thing happens and how quickly or slowly it needs to happen and the message that you're trying to communicate, if you figure that out, you really have everything that you need to start solving the problem. All of that then has to run through the commercial piece, the industry.
Right, who pays?
Whether you're making money, you're making money or you're trying to do this at cost, or it's a thing that you're donating your time. It doesn't matter. There's still a financial question that I categorize as industry.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. I like that. That's really good stuff. I'm gonna the process that you just elaborated is a more elegant way of describing how we take people through how to give a presentation. Right, you start with your audience, then what is it you want to say? What doesn't go in the message, and then and that stuff. That's really great. Where are you going to do it? Talk to me about Legendeer.
Long before online teaching was a necessity, I was going to a program called the Illustration Academy. The Illustration Academy brings together the best practitioners in the world to teach, and it draws in international students from every corner of the world. And it's where I got my professional training after graduating from VCU. They brought me back as the first student to return as a teacher there.
You were like Maverick, your first gun.
I like that, but I will not acknowledge or deny that. So that's no. So it was quite an honor. Amazing people, changed the course of my life, and we continued to build that program. And the question always was, look, we have a significant impact on students' lives. at the 4-week mark. The program goes anywhere from 4 to 9 weeks, but right at 4 weeks, it just goes on this vertical climb, and it's night and day. What happens? What would happen if we had longer exposure to these students, and they had longer exposure to the information? And
You mean it goes on that vertical climb because they've
school of our own and a college.
It goes on that vertical climb because they've reached sort of a critical mass of knowledge. Is that why they finally gotten to the place where they can really sort of start to fly? I mean, why the 4-week mark does things change?
I think there's many reasons for it, but the easiest explanation is they're there. They go to Kansas City. I helped move that program to Richmond for a number of years, and then it went to Florida, and now it's back out in Kansas City. But you've got people who've been going to school, and they've been doing many things, and they've been socializing, they've had relationships, they've had exposure to liberal arts and their actual program training and everything else, and all of a sudden it's the only thing that they're doing.
Right. Okay, yeah.
And there's nothing else, there's nothing else to do. There's no distractions, and everybody else there is doing the same thing. So it's that immersed concept of exposure to the right information for a prolonged period of time, where
it's your box. It's your box. It's content and time based, and right at a certain point, they've locked into that box.
Exactly, and so I think that speaks to Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. It speaks to Tim Ferriss's ability to focus. There's so much of this that's just like all we're talking about is just our ability to focus and have an ambition and a dream. When you're paying money to go to a school or a program, all the other distractions fall away potentially, because people are like, oh, you're going to school and you're learning. We acknowledge the value in that. Go do it. So I think that's the short answer, but of course, the correct information, that they're getting the truth. They're able to ask very nuanced questions in real time. So this is maybe back to the agile learning model again. So anyways, that's kind of where it started. And then from that, Aaron, we ended up deciding to build our own hybrid brick and mortar and online college. And that started off and was going well. We partnered with a different group. I invested something like 4 to 6 years of my life on it. I stopped doing freelance work, and it came crashing down when the guy that we partnered with ended up being a criminal, stealing a bunch of money. So, so what is Legendeer? Legendeer is what I built from the ashes of investing in somebody else's dream. A lot of soul searching at that point in my life, and I said, okay, I got down. We have a big kitchen, big dining room table, and I love note cards. So I got out all these note cards, and I said, I need to know what's important to me, what's critical, what's not, and I just started writing down, important things on each individual note card. So family, relationships,
right,
health, teaching, school, art, illustration, and just had this entire table filled with note cards. And I started building associations and categories, and it's like, wait a second, this really, everything that I'm interested in can fit under 4 categories. And it was health, mind, body, and spirit; relationships, which were family and friends and colleagues; business, which was art and education; and recreation. And they were all screwed up. It's like, these are my life priorities, and the most important thing that requires the most time is my business, and it's really killing me. It's hurting my health. It's hurting my relationships. No time for recreation at all.
Right.
So it just started as a question: can I build a business, something of my own that no one else has any influence or control over, out of these 4 categories?
I love that you did this. I love that you did this visually. That you did this with note cards at your table.
Totally. And there was no precedence for it, but what came from it was, okay, I'm going to build this thing where I noticed that there was a deficit in life experience from students. A lot of our students are trying to build fantasy worlds and fictional worlds for animation and video games, but they try to do it from a distance, and everything looks like a copy of something else.
Right. They're basing their imagination on someone else's imagination. Right.
Exactly. So it's like, well, you have to go have a rich life to tell a great story. So that became this idea of living research as the catalyst of creative output. And the lightest weight thing to do, even for all of our grand ambitions, let's say our, in the beginning it was mine, but I have a business partner now. And it all started with like, well, I'm going to just run workshops over the summer. I'm going to reach out to resources here at the university. And I reached out to the outdoor adventure program, and we used the Rice Center and several things. I just ran a workshop, and I got Ty to speak and Matt Wallen to speak and other professors to speak. And it was cool. It worked. We got to go whitewater rafting, and we got to go hiking, and we got to do all sorts of things and take our sketchbooks. And I took this and said, okay, what's the next stage in this? Like, well, I'm going to go on social media, and I'm going to start giving people weekly challenges. You have to run, bike, paddle, hike, travel by any means to a location that's 5 miles away. You have to document something very specific through camera, through drawing, through whatever means you want, and then you share it back. And our Facebook group grew and grew and grew. So, okay, if we get to 1,000 people, then we've got something. We're going to keep building. And all of a sudden, the kind of people that you want to spend your life with started reaching out to me.
Cool.
This is really cool. I want to be a part of it. I want to, and my business partner, his name's Adam Paquette. He lives in Berlin. He's from Australia. He's traveled the world. He said, this really resonates with me. I don't want anything to do other than to help you realize this. And before I knew it, we were running our first program outside of Richmond in Yosemite National Park. And we had 60 some people show up for a huge workshop with naturalists and producers and people doing coding and illustrators and across the board. We had a huge lecture presentation out in San Francisco. We got a charter bus, and we drove whatever it was, I think 50 some people, 55, 56 people out to Wawona, south of Yosemite. And we camped out for a week, and we went on incredible hikes. We did amazing things. We went up to the base of El Cap, had a good friend of mine who's a climber, talk to us all about what it's like to climb out there. People put their hands on the granite. They look straight up. So we had Alex Honnold come to our campsite late at night. He was going climbing with my buddy the next morning.
No kidding.
So I got to meet Alex, and he pulled up in his white van.
That's awesome.
That was crazy.
That's awesome. So, yeah. I didn't know anything about this. This is spectacular. This is really, really cool. Does it sustain itself? I mean, I assume this is a nonprofit venture. This is an organization of some sort.
No, it wasn't. It was actually for profit. It never lost money.
That's awesome.
It's on hiatus right now. I'm living the principles on my own through these embedded experiences. My business partner's doing it, and we will reframe it. It got, if I'm to be honest, really, really heavy administrative work, super stressful, as you can imagine. I mean, we've been to Zion, we've been to Banff, we've been to the New River Gorge, which was spectacular as well. I've done a very similar thing that kind of built off these things down in Bogota, Colombia, that ended up in an 80-meter mural. We've been to Norway, been to London. Those last three were international. They were not actual expeditions, but just outshoots of the right. thinking and the programming.
But there's a lot of work that goes. There's a lot of work that goes into organizing something like that.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I thought it's like, oh, it's just a workshop. We'll run it. It's like, no, I'm calling the insurance company. I'm finding the charter buses. I'm figuring out how to break things into groups, buying walkie-talkies, and my business partner, when he came in, has been very helpful too. But incredible amount of work, very little financial reward, and what I thought was going to be just like one life-changing thing after another was just me in a sheer panic for a week every year, where it's like we're taking people canyoneering.
That's awesome.
We're taking people rock climbing. We're taking people whitewater rafting on the New River Gorge and hiking, and just it's crazy risk. And we try to outsource accountability, as much as we can. But it got to a place where, yeah, it just got to be a
So,
lot. So
I guess the
I'm
question when I asked is it sustainable? I mean, is this a thing that you could keep going, or could you build an administrative structure that can maybe hand some of those duties off to somebody else so that you can ride instead of drive?
we would have to completely rethink the business model, where the risk is greatly diminished and mitigated. Um, what I would say is that we have ambitions for the concept. I mean, this concept is the driving motivator of Legendeer is dedicated to embedding artists back into the world.
Right. That's cool.
That's the mission. That's the mission. And that has had resonance. I think it has value. And in short, I believe that we need the creative thinkers of the world at the table with the politicians, the policymakers, with the scientists, and we have great value to offer.
That's awesome. And you're on that journey. You don't know what the answer to that journey is yet, but you're working there.
It's a work in progress. I will say that I've published our first Legendeer Press book. That was my sketchbook. We've got other things that are happening that would realize the ambition, but I just had to contract.
Right.
For a while, I got so diluted with so many things that the pandemic became actually a really wonderful opportunity to just focus on family.
That's great. I look forward to the TED Talk and the book and all the stuff that comes out of this. Let me wrap by this is awesome. My mother was a painter, and my father was a scientist, and so I have been embedded in these worlds my whole life, and I'm always fascinated to meet people who deliberately move between these worlds and find a meaning in that journey. I dig you, man. I think you're awesome. I end every interview with these questions, and it's sort of it's one question phrased two ways. One, if there's somebody out there who is considering going down a path like you went down, what advice would you give to them? Or, same advice, if you could go back in time and give your younger self, some advice going forward, what piece of advice would you give? So it's basically the same question. Somebody out there who's listening to this podcast is trying to figure out some direction in their lives. They're trying to, they've gotten to a certain point and now there's a crossroads. Maybe they were in the arts and, it would be nice to make some money or to make a living, or somebody in business who's decided, I'm tired of going into the office and just working for somebody else. It's that crossroads, and you've been to many of them. So do you have any advice for either somebody out there or your younger self? What would you do?
My response to that, Aaron, first of all, thank you for your kind words. I think you're pretty awesome too, and we're going to share a beer and coffee sometime. But to answer this question, there will be a moment of trepidation or fear that will require a leap of faith into the unknown. For everybody who's doing something that is uncharted, it's unscripted. And I've been in that situation on many occasions. And I have learned from an early age to turn and face my fears as much as I possibly can. And this was manifested. I was afraid of snakes, so I got pet snakes. I was afraid of spiders, so I had spiders. I was afraid of heights, so I climbed a radio tower. There's been so many things in my life that I've chosen to do precisely because I was afraid to do them.
You went right at it.
Yeah, I like to say I run at hills, right? So everybody feels that same feeling. And if you are the person who chooses to accept your fear as a catalyst, as a challenger, and not turn from your fears, then you will find yourself in a unique space. I call it the clearing. You will find yourself in the clearing where fear has filtered out most of the people in the world. And it can be on the smallest scale of, I want to show my artwork or my drawing to somebody, but I decide not to because I don't think it's good enough. Or I think about, speaking to my wife for the first time, right? That took tremendous amount of courage in that moment. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. And I started talking to her, and that it was a choice. It was a choice to do something that felt uncomfortable or hard. And I think that if more people were willing to face their fears and accept that as just part of the human experience that is a necessary tool in our growth, then we'd be looking at a different place because people would be much more inclined to pursue their dreams and their ambitions and not fall into a prescribed path.
So jump. That's good. Run at the hill.
Jump.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like it.
Jump.
So what is there a website we can go to for Legendeer?
It's up right now. Again, it's kind of atrophied over the past 2 years as I've contracted a bit, but it's legendeer.org. And it's really, really minimal right now. So I'm not here to promote it or market it. It's something that I had to figure out the processes and the methods. The thing that I'm the most excited about is I'm writing a book, and the book is it's about creative thinking. It's the creative process. I'm trying to figure out if I want to expand into this this world of the shared space between creativity and science. But that might be a bigger book than I have inclination to write right now. Man. Yeah.
Sterling,
so I'm about 60,000 words into the book, so that'll be the thing that I can kind of hold up with some pride.
Nice.
In the next couple of months. Yeah.
Well done with that. Sterling, thank you so very much for your time. I appreciate it more than I can say. Go to reinventionpodcast.com for transcripts and other free resources.